Hello, Michael Chigani, and this is Straight Talk. With me today is Willy Lam. Willy Lam, you're an adjunct professor at the Chinese University of Hong Kong Center for China Studies, and you're a well-known China expert right now.
Well, thank you.
Now, we are going to talk about the Taiwan elections. As you know, China won, and won very big. Obviously, the result was not something that would have pleased Beijing. How do you think Beijing is going to react to this? Because the initial reaction was that Taiwan is a part of China, no question about it, and China has a big toolbox to deal with Taiwan. Is it going to be even tougher on Taiwan?
Well, the initial reactions from the Xinhua and the Taiwan Affairs Office have been actually remarkably mild. They're saying that they're sticking to peaceful reunification, even though, of course, they say they will not tolerate any form of Taiwanese independence. However, we have already seen maneuvers by Air Force, the Navy, and so forth, and they just questioned a new frigate just yesterday. So it looks like Xi Jinping was very mad at the results, at the margin of Taiwan's victory, and then he will revamp the entire Beijing's policy towards Taiwan by beginning with changing some of the personnel of the Taiwan Affairs Office, just as he did the Hong Kong Affairs Office.
Correct. Now, the thing is, if Xi Jinping is mad, I think one of the questions that was asked of China when she won, in fact, the first question that was asked of her was, should she thank Xi Jinping? She didn't directly answer that question, but the question was meant to be that Xi Jinping had said that Taiwan must accept one country, two systems, Hong Kong style, and he did not rule out force to reunify. Surely that helped China win, right?
Well, definitely. But the first person that China should thank is our own Carrie Lam.
Carrie Lam,
because
right.
Until March, April in 2019, the polls show that Han Kuo-yu, the
KMT person,
candidate, was winning. But then after the anti-extradition bill movement in Hong Kong gained momentum, then the polls shifted, and Taiwan has been winning in the polls consistently, and the polls proved to be very accurate on the election night. So I think what is happening is that President Xi Jinping has underestimated potential and real opposition to one country, two systems, and the fact that Beijing has been squeezing Hong Kong even before the anti-extradition bill has shown Taiwanese what to expect if one country, two systems were to be imposed on Taiwan by force or by persuasion or by economic means.
So now, Professor, you said that the first person China should thank is our own Carrie Lam, our own chief executive. Many people think the same way. The thing, though, is this is a lady, our chief executive, has caused this big political firestorm in Hong Kong with the extradition bill, right? And that has helped China win, right? So what happened is she has caused a huge political storm in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong people are now distancing themselves from one country, two systems more and from mainland China. And now, because of what Carrie Lam did, China Wen also won the election, yet mainland leaders, including Xi Jinping, is praising Carrie Lam. She has caused a disaster in two places, yet she gets all this praise. Why?
Well, we have seen the reshuffle of the portfolios of many mainland officials dealing with Hong Kong, including, of course, the director of the
liaison office,
office in Hong Kong, Mr. Law. So we expect that the days of Carrie Lam are numbered. It's possible that she might go at the National People's Congress meeting in March, if not middle of next year. I think what Xi Jinping is thinking about is that he has to make one country, two systems more attractive to Hong Kong people. But unfortunately, Xi Jinping is a super nationalist, and I think the policies he have been relying upon, that means giving more power to the police, to the state security apparatus in Hong Kong, promoting patriotic education in Hong Kong schools, and
a national anthem,
national anthems and so forth. This could be counterproductive. I think Xi Jinping has misread the mood in Hong Kong, and as a supranationalist, he has to say that the one reason why Taiwanese and Hong Kong people have turned against one country, two systems is that they don't appreciate the benefits which this would accrue for both Taiwan and Hong Kong.
Now, you know, on Saturday, the election, you saw huge crowds coming out to vote. I think the turnout was over 70%, which was similar to the turnout for the district council elections in Hong Kong, right? And in both elections, it was actually a rejection of mainland China. Now, the thing is, when you see so many people come out, China Wen, I think, got over 8 million votes, far more than her opponent.
Definitely.
Exactly. So now, do you ever see one country, two systems, Hong Kong style, being applied to Taiwan? Would Taiwanese people accept that?
It will be very difficult for ordinary Taiwanese people to accept that, and the overwhelming support for China Wen shows that Taiwan people realize that as a result of rejecting one country, two systems, their standard of living might suffer because mainland investments in Taiwan have dropped. Beijing has reduced the number of tourists allowed to go to Taiwan and so forth. So, but still, the fact that China Wen got 57.13% of the electorate is a bad sign for Beijing, because it shows that Taiwanese people are willing to say no to Beijing despite the possible impact on their standard of living. And this has prompted my earlier thought that Xi Jinping has to rethink his entire Taiwan policy.
But how? Tell me in what way? I mean, he has said very clearly that it's the one country, two systems, Hong Kong style that he wants to apply to Taiwan. That has been rejected in the election, right? So how can he fine-tune or change or have a fresh thinking towards Taiwan for unification?
Well, one line of thinking is that Beijing might try to nurture a certain fifth column in Taiwan. That means Taiwanese business people, including some who are close to the KMT, the Kuomintang, might, because of economic, preferential economic policies towards Taiwan, be willing to say good things about China. There's even one theory that there might be a decapitation policy towards Taiwan, so that if the entire cabinet of the DPP were wiped out, then these members of the fifth column might come out to say that we are now in charge. We have got Xi Jinping's promise that they won't use force against Taiwan. The mainland will vouch to maintain Taiwan's economic prosperity, but the only thing is that
Taiwanese people accept something like that.
Well, at this stage, in the wake of the election, it's difficult to see Taiwan people accept that. But it's true that the so-called fifth column, the so-called Taiwan traitors,
yes,
they're gaining in influence to the extent that China Wen just at the end of last year, she enacted an anti-subversion, anti-infiltration law to prevent Taiwanese business people, particularly those close to the KMT, from saying good things about the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party.
You mentioned that the first person that China should thank is Carrie Lam. You know, the protests in Hong Kong have helped her win, right? Why is that? Now, you've got protesters in Hong Kong fighting against squeezing by China, and then one country, two systems not working that well. Was that a direct help for China?
This is the direct help because we all remember that just 1 year ago, Tsai Ing-wen and the Democratic Progressive Party she represented suffered a devastating defeat in regional elections. But when the anti-extradition bill in Hong Kong gained momentum, then the entire picture began to shift.
So if it wasn't for the protest, she would have lost.
Well,
could you say that?
She would still have won, but by a much, much smaller margin. One reason is that Han Kuo-yu has his own problems. He is not considered to be a mainstream KMT candidate. Right. His personal relationship with the grandees, with the established authorities of the KMT are bad. In fact, the turnout of the elections has meant a double whammy for the KMT because the KMT is running out of talents. Middle-aged politicians who might become rising stars, who might become candidates for the next term of elections 4 years down the road. So now they have given the opportunity to the DPP to nurture their own younger rising stars.
Let me stop you just for a moment. See you soon. Don't go away. Thanks for staying with us. This is Straight Up. With me is Willy Lam. Willy Lam is an adjunct professor at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, Center for China Studies. Now, Professor, Tsai Ing-wen has won now. She's got 4 years. And her party, the DPP, is always described as independent-leaning party. With 4 years now ahead of her, do you think she's going to push her luck and lean more towards independence for Taiwan, or is she going to play it cool?
Well, she's definitely going to play it cool. Well, she said as much that her major purpose is to maintain the status quo. And moreover, we have to look at the major backer of Taiwan, and that is the U.S. The U.S. certainly doesn't want any change of status quo in the Taiwan Strait. So it's unlikely that even though independence movement is still in the constitution of the DPP, she will make any move. Apart from the fact that the Taiwan economy is suffering quite badly because of the boycott from mainland China. So in order for her successor to win the next election, she has to look at the economy, and the economy will not improve dramatically unless Beijing were to show some sign of rethink, unless Beijing were to give some preferential economic policies to Taiwan. It's very difficult for the Taiwan economy to turn around and for the standard of living to rise.
So what's the next step? I mean, you've got here, Xi Jinping is obviously very angry. You've got Tsai there for 4 years, and Tsai Ing-wen has always said that, you know, she recognizes Taiwan as Taiwan and will not accept one country, two systems, right? Whereas mainland China wants Taiwan to come under one country, two systems. Who makes the next move?
Xi
Or
Jinping.
does it just stay the way it is?
Well, there would be an impasse for a couple of years, but I think Xi Jinping will make the next move. Xi Jinping is a supranationalist, and he is the commander-in-chief of the forces in China.
You mean to use force?
He will not use force, but they are building aircraft carrier battle groups with the purpose of enforcing a naval blockade of the island so that Taiwan will become isolated from the rest of the world. But this won't happen in the foreseeable future of 2-3 years because there's still a big difference between the military powers of the US and China. But Xi Jinping is convinced that if Beijing has 4 or 5 aircraft carrier battle groups, then they might try their luck. And depending on who the next US president is, it's possible that Beijing might come to a big grand deal with the US whereby Taiwan might be sacrificed. I think most Taiwanese all realize that it is unrealistic to rely solely on the US as a backer.
You don't think the US will go to war against China to defend Taiwan?
It's most unlikely. It's most unlikely. But the US will will create conditions in such a way that Beijing will think twice. Beijing will not use military means against Taiwan.
Now let's move away from Taiwan. Come back to Hong Kong. You know, as you said, the Hong Kong protests helped China Wen a lot for her victory. But in Hong Kong, we're also having problems with one country, two systems. We had an election in November where the people just said they have rejected China squeezing Hong Kong. And for that reason, one of the many reasons, the head of the liaison office was replaced. We have a new man who doesn't know much about Hong Kong, but was powerful. He was a party secretary in 2 provinces in China. Why do you think he was sent here? Is he now going to run things in Hong Kong, or is Carrie Lam still in charge?
Well, Mr. Lo, the new director of the Central Liaison Office in Hong Kong, is a 2-term party secretary of Qinghai and Shanxi province. We haven't had such a well-qualified representative from Beijing before. Plus the fact that he has already passed retirement age, so he doesn't have aspirations for high office. So the result is that he will definitely carry out 100%, if not 120%, the potentially draconian policies which Xi Jinping might impose on Hong Kong. This added to the fact that he has no personal connections with major stakeholders in Hong Kong, so that he doesn't need to offend powerful power blocks in Hong Kong. So he's a tough guy. He has a track record of battling the corruption problems in Shanxi province. So I think he will be a tough task.
Are you saying that he's going to squeeze Hong Kong even more? Because the people feel that they are already being squeezed. Hence, we have the protests. Hence, we had this district council elections where all the pro-government, pro-Beijing people were thrown out. So his job is to squeeze Hong Kong even more?
Well, according to the latest policies from Xi Jinping, but we have to remember that as we discussed, Xi Jinping believes that one of the reasons why the anti-extradition bill turned out to be a big political storm was that the Hong Kong government and Beijing had not done the proper things, and that is to enforce patriotic education, to give more powers to the police, and also to use police and legal means to against the protesters. So it's possible that Xi Jinping believes that with tougher policies, even more draconian policies, the anti-Beijing forces in Hong Kong might be brought to heel, and this might have a generally beneficial effect, not only for Hong Kong, but for Taiwan.
So you're anticipating or expecting that there's going to be a tougher line from Beijing, in that the police will be given even more powers, there'll be further crackdowns, and people will be forced to become patriotic through national anthem laws and other patriotic education things. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's what Xi Jinping told his intimate advisors, and that's what the official propaganda from
Can
Beijing.
that work in Hong Kong? I mean, can forcing Hong Kong people who now, the young generation at least, outright reject mainland China, they say they are Hong Kongers, they are not Chinese. Can a policy of forcing them to be patriotic actually work?
Well, we have to remember that Xi Jinping depends on people like the director of the Central Liaison Office and other senior officials in Hong Kong writing papers, writing suggestions to Beijing. So far, the advice Xi Jinping has been given is that a tough policy will yield dividends, even though...
Do you believe that yourself, that tough policy will yield dividends?
I believe it might be counterproductive. But we have to remember that Xi Jinping does not think like us. He's a supranationalist. He believes himself to be the Mao Zedong of the 21st century. So he believes that the use of force, even draconian means, would be helpful for Beijing to tame areas of the country, including Xinjiang, Tibet, Taiwan, and Hong Kong, which do not abide by Beijing's instructions.
Well, you know, this coming week, in a few days' time, apparently there'll be a signing of a first stage trade deal between the U.S. and China. Now, you know, you say Xi Jinping is a super nationalist and he wants to be tough on Tibet and Xinjiang, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. Will the signing of this first part trade deal between between U.S. and China, ease some of the tensions in the U.S.-China rivalry?
Well, certainly tension will be eased to some extent, but Beijing is now pursuing a double-pronged policy. So on the one hand, they have been more flexible with the U.S. regarding dollars and cents tariffs and the agricultural produce they will buy from the U.S. But on the other hand, in the other arena, and that is China's geopolitical policy, China's policy towards extending its influence around the world, and Beijing's policy towards Xinjiang, Tibet, Hong Kong, and so forth. These are not negotiable. And Xi Jinping has also determined that what Donald Trump wants him to do, and that is to let market forces run the Chinese economy, will not happen in Hong Kong, because Xi Jinping believes that the party state apparatus must have a tight control over the economy.
Okay, so last question. I just got 30 seconds left. Do you see a Cold War emerging between the U.S. and China?
A new Cold War has already emerged, and despite the signing of the first phase of the agreement on the 15th, the other parts of the Cold War surrounding geopolitical issues, human rights...
That started already?
That started already, and this will become exacerbated through the year 2020.
Okay, thank you very much. See you next time. Good evening.